And thank you again for joining us on PM Express tonight. And as you may have noticed, since the IMF decision was unveiled by the government of Ghana, it seemed to have triggered what is now very clearly labor unrest. And what is emerging now is clear. The workers believe somehow that because of our past history with the IMF and how they're very strict with employment and the labor unions and the labor generally and the workforce and the compensation package. Well, if government is beginning conversations with the IMF for a bailout, the workers seem to suggest that this is the time to warn government that they will not tolerate any conditionality, any program that will affect their welfare as workers based on previous experiences with the IMF. And so now we are having a major issue now to deal with. Government is having to deal with a major issue with worker agitation. Let's break it down for you. The first to hit the ceiling, the fan, is the teacher unions, pre-tertiary teacher unions. And this pretty much is unprecedented because rarely have we seen all four unions in the pre-tertiary sector of education call a strike at the same time. Normally you will see NAT go alone, you will see NAGRAD go alone, you will see TEU go alone or CCT, or you see a combination of some, but not all four together. Yesterday, just days after government said we're going to the IMF, they said we've had enough. We're calling a strike, withdrawing all our services. It's no coincidence that they decided to make this announcement 3 days after government had announced they are going to the IMF. It's no coincidence. And I will explain to you shortly why it is not a coincidence. Because the TUC gives us the best indication yet why we possibly, and government must brace itself for a bigger problem with labor unrest in the coming days, weeks, and months. So NAT is on strike. And this effectively means that the entire pre-tertiary sector has been shut down, will grind to a halt. And today we've seen the evidence of this. There's no teaching and learning happening across the country. Students are going home. Of course, the GS has said the head teachers should step in. But we all know that is impossible, right? Without the teachers in the classroom, this is impossible. Unless this is dealt with immediately as a national crisis, we're going to have a big problem with education at that level in this country because your kids will not have teachers in the classroom to teach them. And as you're hearing tonight from the minority members on the Education Committee in Parliament, government should simply close out the schools whilst they resolve this immediately. So that's the first major problem that this IMF thing has triggered. And I insist, there's no coincidence that the timing it's happening at this particular time. Why do I say so? Because again, we are seeing that following on the heels of the teachers, we've seen today the Union of Professional Nurses and Midwives have also joined demand, also asking for COLA. Remember that all these teacher unions are asking for COLA. That is the cost of living allowance. They say, look, cost of living has become too excruciatingly painful to bear. You need to cushion us. And they're asking for 20% cost of living allowance. And the key question you need to ask yourself is, can a government that has thrown in the towel to say, listen, we can't do this anymore. We are essentially broke. We need a bailout. IMF give us up to $3 billion because we need that balance of payment help urgently. Can a government that had said that had gone to the IMF, afford 20% COLA for thousands and thousands of workers? It's a key question to ask, and we'll ask the workers unions when they join us. And then you have UTAG. UTAG also issued a statement yesterday, and they will not mince words about what this IMF means for us. They are clear that they believe that in the homegrown policies, should be the way to go, developed by home-based experts and implemented by home-based practitioners. Because they fear, don't leave this to the IMF. We must fix this problem, this economic crisis, ourselves. That's UTAG, University Teachers Association of Ghana. They are already sounding the alarm bells. And they end by stating this: UTAG will not tolerate any IMF conditionality that negatively affects the existing agreements between government and UTAG to improve the conditions of service of its members. I told you that it's no coincidence that we're seeing all these worker unions voicing very vociferously their demands. UTAG, remember, UTAG, they went on strike for a long, long time, threatened to shut down the universities, and they sat with government, agreed a package. They are warning government, don't come and tell me IMF is here so you can't keep your agreement. That's the warning to government already as government begins to sit down with the IMF, and coincidentally, the first meeting with the IMF is tomorrow. So the workers are timing this. They are warning government, as you go into this meeting tomorrow, bear in mind that you have an agreement with us. Don't go to the IMF and tell the IMF you can't implement our agreement, because we won't tolerate it. The nurses are asking the same. The teachers, they've already said, even before you start, we are calling off, we are withdrawing our services. Then today, in addition to these, today, we've heard from the senior staff of universities across the country. So the UTAG is warning. The senior staff has also issued a statement. And there is also another statement from another working union tonight. And so this is becoming a groundswell of warnings to the government. And some of them are giving firm ultimatums because for example, the nurses, they've given government up until next week to pay the COLA, or they also withdraw their services. I mean, the senior staff is also making the same demands of the government. So that is pretty serious indeed. Then the TUC comes in, and TUC is the mother of all the unions, right? The Trade Union Congress, all the unions, the mother of them. Listen to what they say. They say government decision to go to the IMF is tragic and sad. That's their position on this. Then they say that they go to history. The last time we went to the IMF, there was a freeze on public sector employment. That's a TUC telling government why they don't like this. Then they say government did not consult its social partners before engaging the IMF. In other words, the TUC is telling government, before you decided to go, you should have consulted your social partners, including the workers. You say, government, you didn't do that. Then again, they make the point, and this is very important for me, this point here, that the 4% and 7% base pay increases for 2021-2022 was agreed on condition, and there was a condition there, that government will continue to employ young people into the public service. Why are they saying this? Because if you check historically, one of the things that IMF tends to do when they get in is to say to our government, and our government will present a program, but they will insist that including that program, a net freeze on employment. The TUC is telling government, oh, listen, we've already agreed that you continue to employ people. So don't go and sit with the IMF and then agree like you did the last time in 2015 that you put a net freeze on employment. Okay, so what really happened in 2015 that is possibly agitating the worker unions, right? Because remember that what is happening today is not in a vacuum. We've been to the IMF 16 times already. So the workers, they know what has happened in the past. But let's take the last time we went to the IMF and the things that the IMF and government agreed to do. Payroll cleanup, that will affect workers. Secondly, bring wage bill to revenue ratio down from 53 to 55%. Wage bill must come down. That means what we are paying the workers must come down. If the IMF insists that we should do this, how do you pay 20% COLA and still reduce your wage bill? That's a question I need to ask. That is 2015. If the IMF takes that template and government agrees to it, can government reduce this? Maybe not as steep as this, but something within this range. Already, I'll tell you what the wage bill is currently. Can government accommodate the 20% that the workers are asking for COLA? Third thing they did in 2015, freeze public sector employment. That's what 2015, that's what happened. You see how this will immediately clash with this TUC demand and notice to government that we've agreed. We agreed to 4 and 7% on condition that government will continue to employ young people into public service. If you take this and compare it to what happened in 2015, there was a freeze on public sector employment, which means that young people might not get in there. So that's why the TUC is warning. So that's 2015. That's why the workers are saying, we've tasted this before. We didn't like it. So they're agitating. Now, the 2015 program the specific measures, again, and this also border on the workers, right? And I'm trying to isolate the 2015 areas that the workers are paying attention to now. IMF says manage your wage bill. Single spine salary structure was a key problem for the IMF and the government then. IMF said change it or do something about it. Again, extend suspension of salary payments to employees without SNIT. I remember this caused a lot of pain for some of the workers because there was a lot of confusion when this happened. Monthly validation of staff nominal payroll before controller and accountant general pay salaries, and then large-scale public audit of payroll management system to identify irregularities and seek the recovery of any fund unduly paid. And I don't think that any worker or the unions will oppose this. We might see this again in the IMF program that we are currently going into. Now, but the government released a very detailed statement today, and they make some assurances to the workers as far as this is concerned. And the government was giving us a sense of what they will do in the negotiations with the IMF. And this is what government said on that question of employment. It said the decision on employment is usually informed by economics, including the sustainability of the public sector wage bill. And so that isn't too reassuring. But in that, too, the government said, yes, we know what has happened with the IMF in the past, but there's no one size fit all. They make that point in the statement today, government. And so they're expecting, don't use what has happened before as a basis to judge what will happen now. That's the government's point to the workers. I wonder what the workers' unions are saying about it. Do they accept that this may be different? They are joining me, so we'll get a sense from them pretty shortly. Now, this is the picture the IMF will look at. And the first thing the IMF will do when they touch down, and I understand they touched down already. They touched down already tonight, and tomorrow they'll begin a meeting. The first thing they'll do is to open our books. When they do, they'll see this. This is scary. Total revenue, 100 billion. Compensation of employees is 35.8 billion. Compensation alone, right? And then you come to interest payments, 37 billion. What is left? 27 billion. So the workers are taking a lot. The IMF will look at this and say, goodness me, this is unsustainable. We need to do something about this. The question is, what will they do about it? And how will that affect the workers? Is a fundamental question. But the IMF will see these documents. They will see these numbers. And when they see the numbers, they will be alarmed. And they will say, well, if you want to manage the current economic crisis, you don't have money, you're nearly broke, you have to fix this problem with a compensation. Because we can't afford not to pay our interest payments. We can't afford to default. So as for that, I doubt they will touch. Because remember, the IMF itself will be giving us a loan, right? So they can't afford to touch that. One of the things that historically they've always touched, or they've always asked government to do something about, compensation. Compensation. I've showed you that already. And then Ghana's, again, let's do this comparison. The first quarter outlook. This is the Ghana's 2020 revenue generation. If you're generating enough revenue, you have too much problem, but we are not. Total revenue is 1.6 billion. This is the first quarter. That's what revenue has been. Amount spent on compensation alone in the first quarter of this year, out of 16 billion that we've collected so far, is 7.6 billion. Let's pay attention to that. So we are spending a lot of money just this year, 2020, in the midst of the crisis. We've collected 16 billion provisional from the Finance Ministry's fiscal data. We paid 7.6 billion of that to the workers, and we've spent again interest payment. As for that, we can't do anything about, right? 10 billion. I'm saying this because that's a reality. So government might go here, because IMF say possibly go here. Can you do something about this number? 7.6 billion, right? What is left of what we collected in the first quarter of this year alone, after we pay the workers and we paid our interest, our debt, is 1.5 billion. Tell me if the IMF won't look at this and say, do something about this. And that's why the workers are talking. We'll talk to them very shortly. And then look at, whilst we're having this conversation about what is possible and what is not with the workers are saying, if you look at this table, IMF must also be shown this table. Cost of living indicators. The IMF must see the table, because look at what the workers are beginning to bear. They are bearing, this is fuel prices, by the way. This is, the green is diesel, the blue is petrol. Workers are paying this. Look at the diesel cost. 14.59 is currently what they are paying. 14 cedis, 59 pesos. Petrol, 11. 0.59. Look at the trajectory. Look at 2022 alone. Look at the jump they've seen. Look at the jump that the workers are beginning to see. The IMF should be aware of this. The workers should tell them, yeah, we get the picture you are painting with this. We get the picture. We get this picture, right? We get this picture. Yeah, you're paying us a lot. But please also consider the times you're in. This is unprecedented times with all the amounts you're paying for fuel and other things that is killing us. And then look at this. Cost of living indicator. Transport fares have gone up 35%. Many of these poor workers, the teachers, they use public transport. And they've had to pay 35%. 35% more for transport fares have jumped. So how are they going to take this if you don't give me cola? Right? If you don't give me cola, how do I bear 35% jump? IMF must see this too. And then, this is the one I like. I like this particular part of the graph because this is 2014. And this table here is talking about the increase in base pay of public sector workers since 2010. Now, in 2014, the year we began our negotiations with the IMF, government paid COLA that year. And this is comparable to this year because we're beginning a conversation with IMF. Paid COLA of 10% in 2014. So the workers are possibly looking at this history and saying, well, you paid COLA in 2014 when you began your IMF consideration. That time too, we're in the crisis. Why can't you pay COLA in 2022 when you're beginning same conversation with the IMF, right? 10%. But of course, now they're asking twice more, 20%. Well, the economic dynamics were different then and now. So can you make that comparison? But then you come to 2015, the year we got the deal, there was a base pay increase of 15%. So if you are extrapolating, that will be next year. Hopefully that's when we are hoping that the deal will be concluded with the IMF. Can government give the workers 15%? Remember, the workers are asking for what? More than 20% increase in their salaries. Why? Because of the exchange, the depreciation. Sorry, not depreciation per se, but the issue with inflation. The issue with inflation. The inflation is above 27%. The workers say, give us something close that will recoup what we are getting. So 15% is what they got in 2015. Will they get anything close to this year? They are asking for more than 20%. Can government do that? Because historically, we've seen that in the years of crisis, government still gave an increase. So workers are saying, well, we still want that now, but we want more because of what we are facing. So that's the story. Now the workers are joining me, and I have all of them joining me from UTAG, from Ghana Medical Association, from NAGRAT, also joining me tonight. I want to speak to them about the realities I've just painted for you, because it's pretty bleak, I get it. I wonder, are they factoring in everything I've just said about where we are tonight with the negotiations beginning tomorrow in what they are doing with the strikes that have been called? I really want to tap into that, and I want to really get a sense of, now that we are going to the IMF, would that change anything about what they are asking for? Because to say you are going to the IMF is an admission that we are in crisis, right? So does that change anything? I know Njo Kabono has been here before, and we've talked about COLA. That was before the IMF. I know UTAC has been here before. We've talked about their issues. That was before the IMF. Does that change anything now?